You can look at reality as a connection of interconnected systems, people systems, societal systems, economic systems, and how do they form the superorganism that is the anthill of humanity, and what rules are they built on. And that's what you have to think about when you think about sustainability, because we could have all of the green, environmentally friendly products in the world, but we still go to war together because climate change is going to have whole countries being vacated and people have to move somewhere else, and we don't deal with the fact that we're all living on this one planet together. There's going to be the next 30 to 50 years are going to be hugely challenging in whatever is going to happen. We need to prepare, and we need to build a resilient, adaptive, flexible understanding of how we're going to share this earth. And that's a completely different mindset from thinking that, so now I bought a environmentally friendly notebook, so I feel good about myself.
Hi, Tom.
Hello.
Hi, welcome to the Pink Mondo podcast. Welcome to London as well. You've come all the way from Amsterdam, so thank you so much for being here. How are you feeling?
Great. It's nice to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Good. I've been really looking forward to having you on to talk about all things sustainability. Essentially, that's what I want this podcast to be about. So I guess I really want to go straight into it, and rather than asking you to kind of define what sustainability is, can you kind of tell us what the main or one of the main misconceptions of that term is?
Okay, interesting question, sure. The interesting thing is that I've working for about 25 years now on sustainability, that word seems to change its meaning over the years. And it has also really changed its meaning for me as a person. And I think one of the very strong misconceptions about the word is that it can be used as an adjective for a noun. In some cases it kind of works out, but let's say a sustainable car, you can have a sustainable house, you can have a sustainable water bottle, and look, I've got a sustainable bag. That actually, the meaning of that really collapses if you start investigating what you are actually trying to say. For me, sustainability really is just about how do we continue to live as people on this planet in a way that's in some way harmonious with ourselves as well as with the world that we live in. It's as simple as that. But if you then deconstructing what are we trying to do and what are you trying to say, if you talk, for example, about a sustainable toothbrush, that's the example that we sometimes use. The sustainable toothbrush, the toothbrush itself, it's irrelevant whether or not it will continue to exist. It's about its impact that it has on the society that you live in. So you're aiming for a sustainable society, and the toothbrush contributes to that to a more or lesser degree. And that's kind of like an interesting kind of little mechanism in your head that for myself, anytime I hear sustainable bicycle or sustainable something, my head is telling me that doesn't exist. It doesn't make sense. Because we're going to have a society where everything, like the sustainable cars, are going to survive the apocalypse. It's nonsensical. It's really about how we shape our society, how we live with it, and how we develop that, and how do the things that we surround ourselves with contribute to that or deteriorate from it, which is most of the time the case. And that leads you to different conclusions, even if it could be a little bit of mind trick.
Yeah.
It's a very useful mind trick to just kind of like hear this Pavlov like, ooh, sustainable bicycle, that doesn't exist. It's about the impact that the bicycle has on the sustainability of society. And that becomes a very useful mechanic in that sense. So the misconception is that you could really have something like, ooh, a sustainable house. no, you can't. You can have a sustainable society, which we certainly don't have, not anywhere near. And the process of, let's say, building a house or building or whatever, to what degree does it aid in realizing a sustainable society, makes your mind work on different things.
Yeah, it's it's a very vague and often misleading word, which I've definitely found. And when you talk to people, they go, "Oh, yeah, sustainability. Yeah, we should, and then they just talk about all the greenwashing that's going around, basically." And like you just said in your example with the toothbrush, it could be made in one country, packaged in another, shipped to the country. I mean, how can that possibly be a sustainable product? And I guess that's what people need to get their head around. And I'm hoping that this podcast is going to shed some light on all of that. But what other examples then would you say, that we're facing day to day as consumers with that kind of greenwashing?
I think the most readily apparent one that you see all over the place is this idea that we can just continue to live the way that we are.
Yeah.
Make the decisions the way that we are making decisions and operate our economy the way that we do by replacing object A with object B, and suddenly everything is fine. So changing a normal car with an electric car and everything is fine. Except then we'll all be in traffic jams in electric cars. And, there's plenty to be said about that, the electric car over its lifespan has a lower environmental impact than a normal car. In most cases, that is true as far as the life cycle assessment, which is the tool that you use to analyze that sort of thing. But the whole point is, do we want to waste our lives away sitting in a traffic jam? And how does that work in terms of our urban environment? Do you want to keep having parking spaces for privately owned cars all over the place? Or do we try to get rid of that to a large degree and make space for biodiversity and ecosystems inside of our cities again, which is sorely missing? So it's this staring at the object, which, you can't blame humanity for it. Even our language is object-oriented. And our thinking from our education is very reductionistic, and then we start thinking about objects and how we stack them up to be our reality. But that's not really how you have to look at reality. You can look at reality as a connection of interconnected systems, people systems, societal systems, economic systems. And how do they form the superorganism that is the anthill of humanity, and what rules are they built on? And that's what you have to think about when you think about sustainability, because we could have all of the green, environmentally friendly products in the world, but we still go to war together because climate change is going to have whole countries being vacated and people have to move somewhere else, and we don't deal with the fact that when we're all living on this one planet together, there's going to be the next 30 to 50 years are going to be hugely challenging in whatever is going to happen. We need to prepare, and we need to build a resilient, adaptive, flexible understanding of how we're going to share this earth. And that's a completely different mindset from thinking that, so now I bought a environmentally friendly notebook, so I feel good about myself, and I'll move on with
so many
with
people
the stuff.
do that.
Yeah. You can't really blame people from wanting to escape the misery of the front page of the newspaper. But ignoring it or placating yourself by trying to feel good because you got a sustainable handbag isn't going to solve anything. So it's kind of an illusion.
Yeah, like you said, it's object focused, but we should kind of be switching it to people and mindset focused.
Yes.
And I think that it's difficult because we want to take those small steps. Someone like me who wants to try and make a change or be a bit more conscious, and I'm sure there are lots of people out there, listeners too, and they want to make those small steps. So maybe, buying that thing, that is sustainable or so-called sustainable. But then there is that sense of urgency on the flip side of like, okay, climate change is here, there's things happening. So you have that message of like, make small steps, but also it's really urgent and we need to make a big change. So it's difficult for someone, the everyday person, to know, what they should do to kind of help and contribute, do you have any kind of recommendations on what they can do to start off with?
We were just having this lovely conversation about, so when I started 25 years ago, I also didn't know what sustainability really meant, and I'm still learning. So there's no simple answer. There's also no simple solutions. There's no silver bullet, and I can't say like, ooh, if we only start doing that, then all will be fine. I'm actually currently writing a book that's called This Book Will Solve Everything. And in the book, it becomes clear that there's nothing that will solve everything. And it's a kind of interesting journey that I've also experienced myself with my own thinking. And how do you go from this thing where, of course, so there's various stages in the understanding and acceptance, and I describe that in the book also as different stages of grief. The process, like a realization that things are different than what we think that they are. Going first, we're going to deny it. It's like, well, it's not going to be that bad, and technology will save us and things like that. And then you go through bargaining, which is like, well, if we only do this for a little bit, or maybe we can make this deal with the climate, and then just all switch to solar panels and everything will be done. Well, and then that will go to anger, and we got to start pointing fingers. It's your fault. This organization's fault. It's the politician's fault. It's the big company's fault. That's not very useful either. And you get beyond that, and then, you go through a stage of depression, which a lot of people are also finding. It's like, ooh, there's nothing I can do, and everything is miserable, and so on. And then after you internalize that and actually start saying, no, there are things that we can do. Actually, we can do a lot. And the best thing about it is that once you get to that stage of understanding what's really helpful, you can get incredibly inspiring and hopeful perspectives on what the future can look like. And they address multiple fundamental issues at the same time, not just climate change, but also resource distribution. And like, there's very poor people and very rich people in the world. That needs to be reconciled. How we spend our days and what our work contributes to. There's a lot of people doing menial work that is not rewarding, that could be replaced by lots of interesting things, or we can even eliminate it altogether and then have more highly valuable existence for a lot of people. And that's all that sustainability can really bring. And so the contribution that each person can make is the first step in sustainability is understanding being aware of the urgency, which is where most people are now at. That's where the front of the newspaper is now. Biodiversity is crashing. The water level's rising. Oh my God, this resource is disappearing. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? It's this sense of the urgency, and we're feeling it stressful. But that evolves into an understanding of the more fundamental principles that we need to address, and that this is not a choice. You can make it political if you want, but it isn't. We either do it or we'll die not really trying, and that will cause a lot of problems which we'll face. So that understanding breeds not necessarily an urgency, but a reality that shows that, look, we're going to have to get hands-on with it. And then every person in society, no matter what it is that you're to be doing, you can start imagining a little bit. So what would your life be like if you are living in such a sustainable society? What would you be doing with your life? Like if you teach at a school, what you would be teaching. If you work in an office, what kind of work would you be doing? What kind of conversations would you be having? How do you relate to your children or your relatives or your friends? How would you decorate/enjoy your life? Would you still fly up and down to Ibiza every week, or every week? Everyone does that, but every year to enjoy yourself, or would you derive meaning and quality of life from other things? Because I think a lot of the things that we have installed in our life, that we are building and doing to feel appreciated, feel valuable, feel inspired, to feel that we learn or evolve or something, are actually built on a little strong misconceptions. And we all know that owning a lot of stuff is not going to make you happy, but still we follow the marketing and then the pressure from the materialist economy that we built, that so shopping is going to make us happy. Well, there's some endorphins and things like that in our head that will give us a little temporary boost. But how do you structurally reconfigure that? So there's that sense of a personal journey, and it's going to be different for everyone. But opening that conversation and leaning back, looking at our lives, is like, do I want to go and sit in an office 5 days a week? Is that how I want to spend my life?
Yeah.
And that's a far more fundamental and interesting question than to, what car do I replace my current car with? It's more like, what patterns within my life can I replace with a pattern that I can see being part of a sustainable future, and then through those actions contribute. And one of those actions is also, who do you vote for? What conversations are you having on the dinner table? What do you teach your kids? What opportunities do you allow them to follow, or what do you encourage them to follow? And those opportunities may be very different from the ones that you've had as a kid growing up. And that's, I think, a big challenge for younger generations, is to find their own pathway there. Because I'm getting a bit older. I don't have the answers for younger generations. They're going to have to find ways to build that future for themselves. It's incredibly difficult if you don't have the reins of shaping what that future will look like. So in that sense, I think, depending on who you are, if you're younger or if you're older, your responsibilities will be different towards helping to build that sustainable future.
Yeah, I think awareness is the first step, definitely, talking about it. And then also, like you just said, kind of looking at the patterns that we have. I mean, yeah, you go on social media and you see what other people have, and you want that, you want to travel, you want that bag, or you want that thing to kind of give yourself, that ego boost maybe. But is that really bringing you joy, which is, a whole other conversation. But also looking at the system of your life as well. So is that system, that small little bubble that's your life, which you could call a system, is that bringing you joy? And is that actually, benefiting others and the planet as well? And that goes into this whole systems thinking, which is something that you've definitely introduced me to, in the sense that it's not a new concept by all means, but it's something that's, I guess, can be in lots of different contexts. But in the context of sustainability, the systems thinking is one of the, if not the most important element to it. Is that right to say?
I think so. Yeah. But there are different flavors of systems thinking also. And it's without getting too much into the academic detail of it, because I'm actually not all that interested in the academic detail to begin with, until it becomes useful in trying to do something.
So can you simplify systems thinking for us?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of the school of what's called complexity thinking, which is a branch of systems thinking. There's the older traditional version, which came out in the 60s and 70s, and the thing is, that sounds like a long time ago. Ooh, it's been around since 60s. But compared to the human, evolutionary timescale, it's tiny. So we're just getting started.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about systems thinking, that it sounds complicated, and it sounds like you have to read a lot of really fat books to understand it. But the opposite is true. If you look at kids, especially little kids, they understand it almost immediately, because they don't necessarily have been pre-programmed yet to divide the world into relatable objects and having this, what we call, reductionist perspective on life. So I greatly enjoy also working with kids, and they'll go like, okay, that makes sense. And for example, one perspective is that to see yourself not necessarily as just an individual. So I'm not saying don't see yourself as an individual, not just as an individual, but see yourself almost like a cell of a larger organism, where we do have certain decisions that we can be made, but we have a certain role in society. Like, the cell in your hand has the role of being a cell in your hand, which has some of the same makeup as the cell in your elbow, but it is a bit different. And so that's also us. We are components of the larger thing that's called society. And within that society, everyone has a role, everyone has a function, everyone has value to bring. And systems thinking allows you to look at the patterns that organism has. Almost if you can see humanity as, you can see it as multiple or one kind of giant sleeping or active organism. What behavior does that organism exhibit? And I'm an urbanist by training, urban planner, and I love looking and trying to experience the behavior and the characteristic of the organic creature that can be a city. So I have this one trick that I do is I go to a new city that I like and I have the time. I put on some headphones and I try to walk around for 24 hours. Very calm, because if you walk for 24 hours and you're going to be tired at some point, but you do, and that's the point.
You can barely walk for 24 minutes.
Well, you can sit on a park bench for a lot of time as well, but you just kind of allow yourself, and you know you're going to run that marathon mentally, and at some point your head is going to get really tired, and things are going to just start blurring into each other. Time is going to change its meaning for you. But then there's these moments where you disappear because you're too tired to have your ego be present, and you're just there and you experience what the city is. And there's these beautiful moments that I love, for example, sitting in the underground or metro and then seeing that switch from about 5 a.m, where the late night party people that are still half drunk in the metro, they intersect with the early nurses, the fishermen, and the people that have their early morning shift. And they almost completely misunderstanding cells of that body. They're not really communicating. Their lives are passing each other in the same moment, but in a totally different reality. But there you see the organism of humanity operating within the city, and then it's alive. It's throbbing and breathing like an organism, and it grows and shrinks. And understanding that organism has a will of its own that is not really stacking together of the individual components of us, your desire and wants and needs and dreams and mine. They together don't add up to what the organism of a city or a country is doing that has its own will. And you have to accept that. There's no way you can fight it, but there are ways to learn about its behavior. And when influencing it, and then we can start seeing, okay, what little kind of manageable triggers can we find within that organism that allow that organism to change its behavior? And that's what it's about. And then you can create these snowball effects where you start with a relatively manageable project or budget and time that can then start evolving into a larger thing that's larger than the project, larger than what you are doing, or larger than the organization that you're in, and starts to run through society as its own thing. And there's examples of such projects, and they are becoming more and more apparent as this kind of systems thinking or systems innovation, sometimes called, is becoming more prevalent. And the beautiful thing about that is they can cause massive amounts of improvements for lots and lots of people in many different ways. While they also, once you get them started, they do their own thing. So you don't need to spend billions and billions on it, because it economically drives itself. And that also is the speed that we need to have that transformative power, that we need to try to fix some of the things that we're going to be facing this century. So for me, it brings a huge amount of hope and inspiration to look at that. So then sustainability is no longer about just doing less bad stuff. It's about doing amazing things that allow beautiful things to happen, and they're realistic and they're scientifically accurate, and they are just growing out of their own accord, using that understanding of the breathing of the organism, the growth and movement of humanity as a system.
There's something very peaceful about that, about thinking of it that way.
Yeah.
And I know through your company, Accept, you do a lot of projects, innovative projects. One of them being, and I guess this is a kind of twofold question, because one of them being Orchid City, which is kind of a blueprint for a sustainable city. But then also, like you said, I guess with the current, world the way it is a blueprint going to work? Or like you said, will it be case by case when you go to these cities and you have to kind of work around what's already there, rather than just kind of a blanket, blueprint that's going to go across everything?
Yeah, so the answer to that is yes. So, let me clarify. So Orchid City is the result of us putting together lots of different puzzle pieces of projects that we've been doing in various different sectors.
Yeah.
So it's not just city design, it's also agriculture, which is a huge component of how our society, how that works. It's often not in our field of view, but it's a giant driver of both environmental, ecological, and economical foundations. Then there's the financial side of things, and then there's usually when we think in terms of building a new city, you're thinking of houses, and that's a component of it. But there's also industry, like what do we make, and there's education, there's schools, and there's mobility and transportation, and all of the things that basically are a component of our real society will come together in a city, and that's why I love it so much, because everyone kind of can understand it. It's a fairly simple story, like a fully self-sustaining and future-proof city that is both realistic and affordable. And then basically having all the fundamental elements of that in place. And being affordable means that it's literally affordable for everyone, and not just some rich people that happen to have enough money to live in their little elitist enclave, which is what most eco-cities actually are. Too expensive and way too much focused on fancy technologies that are just doing something for that house, like an air conditioner. It cools that room, but it uses a lot of power and throws it away. So it uses all these ecological systems that deliver the same value, but by stacking them together with smart regenerative agriculture and smart energy systems that are not using any new technologies so much per se, but that connect them in a different way, you create a toolkit that allows you to reconfigure whatever is needed in a given space to build that sort of living environment. So, for example, one in Yorkshire would be totally different than one in Ireland or in Vietnam or in Brazil.
Okay.
They would look different, they would feel different, they would be adapted to their local climate, to the local economy, to local culture, to all of those things, but they use the same principles to create them. And then you can use that to both build something from scratch, but you can also do that by looking at what is already there and then build a transition pathway for what is there to grow towards what it could be. Because in the end, like most of the buildings that humanity really needs have already been built. So the transformation challenge is huge. And that's where Orchid City provides those different frameworks to help you reach that point.
Yeah, so just for the listeners, I guess, so Orchid City is like a framework or like a blueprint for what a sustainable city would look like, basically. And I think that when I was kind of doing my research on it, I was thinking, how would it work? Because you watch those futuristic movies where they have it all. They've got the kind of like environmental issues down, the social issues, but it never works out in the end. It kind of like there's always some kind of something that's that's missing, like culture or passion, or the human part is missing from it. So I guess one of my questions was going to be, is the culture going to kind of, do we have to sacrifice culture and that kind of thing to do this? But I guess, like you said, it will be different for every place that you go to.
Yeah, I would say the opposite almost.
Yeah.
So Orchid City is very much has humanity and its culture at the front, right, and center. the way that we live together and shape our lives, the way that we deal with getting older, the way that we educate ourselves, the way that we work and how we spend our time in work versus, playing with our kids or sports or whatever, those are absolutely fundamental to how a city can and will operate. And those, you can actually materialize them in the way that the city is designed. Like, for example, if you put all of the offices in one corner and all of the houses in the other corner, you automatically create a need for people to get into some kind of piece of transportation and go to the office back and forth and spend time commuting. But if you integrate that in a far more finely graded way, that everything and all your needs are within a walking distance, you eliminate the need for commuting to a large degree. So reconceptualizing how we can happily and pleasantly live in such an environment actually has influence on how you design and then manifest that, where culture and our being together is the very first thing that we want to resolve. And then we layer that on top of all of these other things that are important, the ecological connectivity in systems with biodiversity and our water management and our how do we, use our material resources within our daily lives and within the industries that we are surrounded with. Then you can kind of get the 1 + 1 = 3 situation. So if you just schlep some solar panels on top of your house, then, well, you save a bit of energy. That's fine. But if you do that as a city and build renewable energy systems as a city, you get something very different. Because an energy system needs to be built for its peak, the highest point in the day where everyone, turns on the microwave or the television or whatever. Often it's kind of like 5 or 6 p.m. That's when everyone needs their energy. But the rest of the day you don't use that much. So if you have a truly renewable energy system that has enough for the peak, then when it's not the peak, you have free energy. 100% freely available energy. And economically, that becomes a huge driver to use it, to produce things, to make things, but also to celebrate. Have your fountain. A fountain costs a little bit of energy and it's pleasurable. Why not? You've got the water because you're filtering it yourself from rainwater, so there's plenty of that. There's plenty of energy. Let's enjoy it. Let's celebrate. Because it doesn't cost anything anymore. It's a tiny bit of maintenance and infrastructure resource. It's just like completely tiny compared to what we're currently spending on these huge coal and gas plants with thousands of miles of high power voltage lines. And so we don't need any of that anymore because it's all decentralized. Now, if we manage to build that while also ensuring that their ownership is not just with a few elites, but that's also distributed, it's part of your house, part of your assets, then we're getting somewhere. And then that free energy is also yours. So you will stand to economically benefit from that investment, which then becomes a hugely profitable thing as a city, that everyone that lives there stands to benefit from its economic power to develop this abundant, beautiful existence. So if you really put all those things together, you get a really different reality. And it works financially like crazy because all of these things create value. You stack them up onto each other. And it's not just you build a house, you sell the stones. You build so much more value in how they operate from day to day. You create a new reality. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that it's definitely about mentality, it's power in numbers. And I know through your company you work with organizations. And so what's the attitude out there at the moment? I mean, I don't want to point fingers and say, it's all the big organizations, but what are you encountering when you're working with these organizations? Do you find any obstacles?
Yeah,
I'm sure
huge amount of obstacles. I think there's quite a diversity of mentality. Also, we're finding more and more individuals that understand that messing about in the margins is useless, that are finally coming to the realization that like a truly fundamental understanding of what's going on and an intervention is not a choice, it's a necessity. And that's people leaning back and go like, okay, wow, I thought we could kind of patch things up with some electric cars here, some solar panels there, and some recycling over there, but they're realizing it's nowhere near enough. Okay, take a deep breath. So how, what then? So they don't have the answers, but they do have that burning question inside that just, this, I call it moving the deck chairs on the Titanic. That's a big one.
Yeah.
So I see more and more of that. Then I see within the strategy of a lot of big corporations is that they have now institutionalized sustainability to a degree where they have a brilliant PR campaign and they get very far with literally deceiving people. Whether or not they do that knowingly doesn't matter. For example, Apple, which is great. They have made this recent movie that's trying to convince everyone that Apple is very at the forefront of their sustainability stuff in their movies about their sustainability reporting. It's greenwashing in its new form. It's really, they're not doing anything fundamental. The fundamental question they should ask is, how do you create products that last almost forever, can be repaired, don't use these material resources, because their business model is based on selling as much stuff as possible. Maximizing that box pushing. If they don't change that, they're not going to be doing anything significant otherwise. It's just going to be a dress show. And a lot of companies do that. So for example, H&M, it's the large clothing manufacturer. I think you have them here as well. They've been advertising that they've been working on a circularity plan and everything is circular. And they've recently found out by research from, I believe, The Guardian even, that to the very large degree, all of that's not true. And it just ends up in a giant trash pile somewhere, I believe in Pakistan or India. But you can see it from space,
I read that.
And it's just, that's heart-wrenching. And they're not yet being confronted by the repercussions of this. And as a consumer, you have little power. At some point, we all need a phone to operate in our daily lives. You can say, oh, I'm going to live without a phone. Well, good luck. For most people, it's simply not a realistic option. So if you then buy one, as a consumer, you have very little influence. When I'm going to buy a product that's not an Apple or not a Samsung or whatever, they all have their own issues. So it's, we're all in that same boat together. So how are we going to steer this? And who's the first mover there?
Exactly.
And I think most big companies have the power to be a big mover. And if they are not doing that, they are not part of the solution. They are part of the problem. And I think that from systems change perspectives, it is quite clear that usually big change don't come from the big established parties. So, for example, in the Netherlands, you have this phone company called Fairphone. It's a tiny phone manufacturer. They are like a speck of dust in the world of electronics fabrication, but they are completely trying to reinvent and restate the entire ecosystem of how these are built, how they're repaired, how they're made. They're trying to do that. And if they, I hope, play their cards right, they could very quickly, with enough investment and so on, overtake, because it will take Apple and Samsung and so on decades to reformulate their supply chains and really rebuild their business models. So our choices are to allow those opportunities to exist. As a consumer, you have very little power. You cannot change the world as a consumer. But if we work at big corporations, and again, we get to that first question you asked, what is the conversation that we're having? Are we going to be satisfied when we say we've used 10% less energy this year? Because that's not enough. We have increased our recycling by 20%. Well, recycling is not going to save the world. It's, let's do it while we can, but it's going to have to come from a completely different mindset. And we need to prepare, start, and help developing that conversation can take place. And that we back the intents to start investigating that and start to move away from just awareness to initiating the actions that will take place. And a lot of that also lies with politics. It lies within business strategy. It lies within regulation. There's a lot of players at the table that should be walking up to the plate. And often enough, they might be aware, but they're not. And how then, within the position that you have as an individual, do you confront that? Well, you can vote, but you can also, make your message heard. That's what you do with the podcast, which I think is great. So everyone has their role to play in that story.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get really overwhelmed and then just think, oh, I can't change it, so I'm just going to forget it and I'm just going to carry on because it's too much to bear, too much on my shoulders. But then on the flip side, then you have these moments of hope and you get motivation. And like you said, with the small companies or podcasts like this or different various causes for sustainability, then you start picking up hope a bit more. Take me back, I guess, to that moment in your life then, where you just thought, okay, this is the space I want to be in. And why did that come about for you?
It's also kind of an evolutionary process. But, I was 19 when I started Accept. That was after I already had started a couple of little businesses from about 13. I made T-shirts and I burned illegal CDs. Don't tell anyone. Little things like that. So I kind of knew how to run a little business. But at that point, I was a student of industrial design at Delft University, and I felt an intrinsic kind of resistance to this idea that we were just going to design products to be sold as much as possible. Because at that moment, the design degree had as a slogan like we're designing products to improve the lives of people. But I was looking at it. It was like, no, we're not. We're trying to push as many vacuum cleaners as possible. We're not trying to improve the lives of people. Through consumerist products? Well, I'm not sure about that. So then I thought, well, just want to look at organizations that use innovation and design as a means for truly helping people, maybe even just people who have a much less comfortable life than we do in developing countries or whatever it is. And I didn't find one. I was surprised. It's like, why is no one using innovation as a means for true social, environmental development? And I couldn't find one. And I thought at that point was like, well, if no one's doing it, I might as well do it myself. Being a bit arrogant and a bit cheeky, like, well, okay, fine, it's going to be easy, no worries. I soon found out it wasn't easy, but I did. And in the first year, it was especially incredibly enlightening, because I can tell you about one project. We started working with a social housing company in the Netherlands that has like hundreds of thousands of houses. And I helped them develop a campaign to replace the normal old light bulbs with the power-saving light bulbs. The ones that were like a little glass spiral.
Yeah.
And so it was a hugely successful campaign where people contributed, the whole community helped and so on. And we replaced more than 3 million light bulbs or something. Quite a lot. So we saved a lot of energy. But then a year later, I read in a piece of scientific research that those light bulbs, they contain mercury.
Yeah.
And if they break, that mercury gets released into the environment. And that mercury then continues to poison everything that is alive for as long as it exists out there, which is probably until the end of time. And wow, that is really bad. And so what we actually did is we had a project where we shifted from energy production to environmental toxicity. And I felt horrible. I felt horrible about that. Because it would have been better if we hadn't done anything. Not at all. And so I came to thinking, is like, how can we then work? What's the checklist to run down? Like, okay, so we don't avoid that. What do I research before I decide to spend my time on things? And that's how I started developing this framework and encountered systems thinking and started developing my own thinking in terms of what is sustainability then? If it's not about saving energy, well, that could be a component of it, but that's just one of the tools in the toolbox. It's not necessarily the end goal that you're trying to have. So reformulating my understanding and development in that process. And yeah, the organization followed suit. And I think with Accept, each time that I see that other organizations are picking things up en masse, we kind of leave it and we go to the next station to try to be a little bit ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And to discover, to be a vanguard, if you will, or a scout, already, run into some of the glass walls that you're going to run into and discover that and bring it back to the masses to communicate and to do that experiments. And for the clients that hire us, the advantage is that can be the first mover and do something really innovative that in a space where few people are operating still and make really big differences, like the work we did for IKEA, which changed the entire world's paper supply system. So a relatively small project that had a huge impact around the world. And IKEA could just lean back and enjoy the fruits of that coming to them, not having to do much. And seeing that work, those are such rewarding moments. And then also, building that with the team of IKEA and intensely collaborating through that discovery phase and then, the solution implementation and then, finally celebrating that and then seeing it continues to this very day. It's more than 15 years or 13 years that the project is running. And it just continues to reap its benefits year after year after year. And it increases the sustainability of not just of the paper that IKEA uses, but all the paper that is produced by all of the paper manufacturers around the world that are contributing to this.
Well, some things like that, that's amazing, that kind of impact. And some things like that, they work and, they have that longevity. But there are things then you touched upon now with the mercury, that there's always there's a good intention there, but then it ends up being pretty much a disaster. And I know that there are some examples that I read that you wrote about, one of them being a kind of green, well, you can explain better than me, but a kind of building that they built with, gardens on the balconies. And then there was a huge mosquito infestation or something. And then it was basically now a derelict building. Have you got any other examples of the good intentions, but just disastrous?
Well, to be honest, really, if we're going into that one, the expression, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Yeah. That road to hell, we're very good at building that as a humanity. Most of the things that you encounter in your daily life that has a stamp of sustainability on it will probably work more to the detriment of what we're doing than anything else. Mm-hmm. So thinking that whatever product you just bought that has sustainability on the box is probably, you would have done better by not buying it. You would have done better by creating a thing that replaces the materially or the object with something else. So there's tons and tons of that. Bioplastics. Bioplastics are a lovely invention in certain ways. But replacing things that are now made out of plastic with bioplastic causes a huge amount of new problems and also continues to permeate the whole plastic addiction we have as society. So the fact that we buy products that are in packaging that we throw away for almost the entire length of human history, we didn't have that. We only have started doing that in the last, let's just say 100 years, probably less. And we now think we can't do without it. And there's always going to be an argument, but for this particular product, it's really difficult. So let's just, but we use bioplastics. Well, the bioplastics are also going to cause huge problems. Like if you merge normal plastic with bioplastic in the same recycling stream, it degrades the whole plastic batch and you can't recycle it anymore. So you get these huge problems. So all of these object-oriented things, I replace object A with a slightly differently manufactured engine, whatever. Product B are usually going to be red herrings. Usually they're going to be yeah. And even if they do just help a bit, they're probably still going to distract from the fact that the whole system that we work and live in needs a fundamental rethink. And don't get distracted by these things that are trying to call your attention. So, for example, when I go to the supermarket, let's say 10 years ago, I would still be studying the labels of the products that I bought. But I'm not using my time like that anymore. I mean, sure, I'm conscious, if I have a chance to make a slightly different impact by buying peanut butter 1 instead of peanut butter 2, fine. But I'm not going to be spending a huge amount of energy in that because I don't have that decision-making power. I don't have all the information at my disposal. I don't know really what's going on. And even though sustainability labels, some of them can be misleading. So I just live a fairly conscious life as a individual consumer myself, but I dedicate my entire work and my entire thinking and all the conversations that I have to trying to build a different system. And I think that, if more people do that, and it maybe even need to be only 1% of humanity, then we're going to get there. And that should change the conversation in the boardrooms, change the conversation at schools, within political circles. You just won't stand for this distractive red herring stuff. Just stop it. Let's talk about the fundamentals of this. And that's it's challenging and thrilling at the same time.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's your kind of, I guess, final message? But that's it, really. That's what you've just said. It is just being aware and thinking differently and informing yourself. But is there anything else you want to leave the listeners with, like an important message?
I think that if you feel depressed about or sad or frustrated or stressed out about the bad news that we're going to continue to get for quite some time, is try to see that, also move beyond that and see that in the final solution that is just obvious to everyone that's working on the systems thinking field, that the world of abundance, that is a realistic, realizable, feasible future for us as people, delivers us so many opportunities as people, such a beautiful future that it's really hopeful, and contributing to realizing that in whichever way you can find yourself in, whether or not you decide to blog about it or make a podcast or try to influence the boardroom at your company or whatever it is that you want to do, that is a truly meaningful. And you don't need to have the answers on how to get there. You just need to have the realization that that is where we're trying to move to. And that is basically fundamentally rethinking the way that we live, eat, breathe, interact with each other. But it's all for the better, and it's a really beautiful future. So I think that that's what I would like to give as a message.
Yeah, I think we need to work together, demystify, get informed. And this has really inspired me. This has given me so much knowledge, and you have anyway in the past with your kind of online courses and through your company Accept. So yeah, thank you. And we've reached a point in the podcast now where I do a little interactive part with my guest. It's a fun truth or dare. So pick one for truth or dare. So do you pick truth or dare?
Man, it's always so easy to pick truth because I don't have any problem with truth. But what happens when I pick dare? I'll do dare. Why not?
Okay, cool. I like it. It's a very wholesome dare because it's all about sustainability, and it's still like a Zen kind of dare. It's just plant a tree. So that's what you have to do. Which I'm sure you've already done many a times.
yeah, but with my own hands.
Yes.
I don't have a garden, for example, so a little bit challenging. But my sister does.
There you go.
So
I think always a solution.
Yeah, dig a hole in my sister's backyard. I'm not sure how enthusiastic she's going to be about that part, but
I'm sure she'll be happy.
Yes, she actually she planted her own food forest, not in her own backyard. She's my sister also.
I think sometimes I do think I just want to leave the city and just go and live in a farm or an allotment and just basically like you said with that kind of blueprint city, just make my own food, have animals around. It just sounds so peaceful.
That would be nice,
Yeah.
yes.
But yeah, plant that tree, and we'll need proof so we can put it on social media as well.
Okay.
But thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to just inform us all and be here today. I really appreciate it.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.